How was your spring break?
It was very nice. We went down to New Orleans and saw some families, so that was nice.
Uh-huh.
How was yours?
Yeah, good. Nice. I always like that week. I don't have a lot of work, so I get a chance to play some golf and stuff.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. Sorry about the confusion on today's session.
That's all right. It was probably my fault.
Well, no, it wasn't your fault. It's just that, I allow people to schedule sessions online on my website, and somebody had grabbed the 4 o'clock slot a couple of weeks ago before we switched days. And when we switched weeks, I forgot to tell you about it.
Oh, okay.
And then what happened was they canceled today, so it opened back up again. So it was just supposed to be a half-hour session. But anyway, yeah, I do offer that. I don't know if you knew that or not. I, about a month ago, started offering half-hour sessions to people online for half the price, for $16 instead of $32, and it's worked out nice. It's worked out well for a lot of people. It's a lot easier to focus and concentrate for a half hour than it is for an hour. So, if you're ever interested.
Real quick, my mom was wondering, after the session, I take my ACT on the 23rd.
Okay.
I was wondering, we were both wondering if we could start or keep going with the online tutoring, because I seem to be a little bit struggling in geometry.
Okay, for sure. For sure. Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Yeah. Just let me know. I think I have you down at 4 o'clock for the next 3 Mondays. And
yes.
I don't know if you want that or not. Do you want to go weekly up until the ACT? You can think about it and let me know. You don't have
to. Yeah. Well, and it might be like before. Today I didn't realize that we had the 3 set up, but it might be like before. If we start doing it every Monday, it might be from 3 to 4. So.
Okay. All right.
I'll talk to my mom about it, and I'll let you know.
Sounds good.
Great.
All right. Let's start a new ACT test. We had gotten to question 38 on the last one, and that's a good place to stop and start again.
Okay.
And then maybe this test, if we have time, we'll get all the way to the end of it. Just to give you a taste of some of those harder problems. In general, I think we're better off focusing on these easy and medium problems. So number 1, can you read that okay? I apologize for its blurriness.
Yes.
Okay. I need to get a camera with a tripod or something, I guess, instead of just holding it. Can't hold it steady enough for it to be clear.
Well, it's great. It works fine.
Okay. So if x plus 3 equals n, what does 2x plus 6 equal?
Would that be would it be 2n?
Good. Very good. Now, did you do that the hard way or the easy way?
Well, I just thought, well, x plus 3 double would be 2x plus 6.
That's the easy way. Good for you. That's what you're supposed to do, is recognize that relationship. As opposed to doing it the hard way, which would be if x plus 3 equals n, and x equals n minus 3, then I'm going to plug that in up here. 2n minus 3 plus 6, and by the time you're all done, you get 2n. But that would definitely be the hard way to do it. Always look for those shortcuts. In other words, check the relationship of this function with this function. See if there's anything about it like it's exactly twice.
Okay.
Okay. pretty straightforward.
You would distribute the A to both, so AB minus 2AC.
Answer G. Okay, there's 3 missing numbers. This is an arithmetic series, meaning the difference between any 2 numbers is always the same. When you have an arithmetic series, not that you need to know that this is an arithmetic series, but that's what we're talking about. In other words, if I have something like 9, 14, 19, 24, each of these numbers is separated by 5, right? That's an arithmetic series. In other words, if I make this 25, that's no longer an arithmetic series. So whenever you have a series where they're separated by the same amount between every 2 numbers, that's what this is asking about. So which of these answers fits for these 3 spots?
A.
Good. Okay, Diane bought 1 DVD for $20 and 5 others for $8.49 each. What was the average price paid per DVD for these 6? And again, before you do this problem, it's worth looking at the answers. They don't really want a numerical answer, do they? They want the expression that you would come up with. So, and we would have to come up with that expression anyway, so it doesn't help a lot to have the multiple choice. When you're figuring up averages, always remember every average problem I think I have ever seen means totals. You have to work average problems by figuring out totals. What's the total amount she spent on the 6 DVDs?
It would be...
Don't give me a number, give me an expression. Look at the answers that we're looking at.
$20 plus 5 times 8.49.
If that's the total amount she spent, what was the average amount?
What was the average amount?
How do you get an average? If you have a total. If I give you 3 numbers, 9...
You divide the total.
There you go. Divide by how much?
The amount. So divide by 6.
The total number of DVDs. Right.
Right.
In other words, average is the total divided by the number. So that the answer is G. But let's just talk about average for a moment. What is the average of, hold on a moment. How would I get the average of those 3 numbers?
You will add them all together and then divide them by 3.
Okay. It's as straightforward as that. And that's all this problem is asking you to do. Okay. Notice that if we didn't look at the answers, we could have spent a lot of calculating power coming up with this number. And then we would have gotten it, and it wouldn't have done us any good. Right? In other words, we wouldn't know what to do with that answer. I wouldn't know what to do with it. If you gave me a number like $11.21 was the average price, I wouldn't know which of these answers that was. So this question guarantees that forces you to know how to do it. Oh. worse than the other one. I'm going to have to get a new smartphone that has a better camera in it. Mine is only like 5 megapixels. Can you read that?
Yes.
So what do I need to do?
Well, do you have to get the same denominators?
Well, first tell me what you're going to do.
18 and 1/4 minus 10 and 1/2.
Okay.
10 and half.
So that's the problem. Now the question is, what's the easiest way to get that answer? Do you have your calculator?
Yes.
See what your calculator gives you when you try to do this problem. And tell me if you run into any difficulties.
Okay. 1 second.
Does your calculator allow you to put in a improper or a proper fraction like this?
It does when I press the U and D button. So it allows me to write 18 and 1/4 subtracted by.
Okay. And this is the calculator you're going to use to take the test, right?
Yes.
Okay. So do
It
the
gave me 7 and 3/4.
Okay, good. Okay. I had another student on this problem, and she tried doing it in the calculator, and it didn't work for her. And she had to end up converting it to decimal, change the 18 and a quarter to 18.25 minus 10.5. Now the calculator will give you 7.75, and using that button that switches back and forth between decimal and fractions, you'd get this. So there's a couple of ways to do it. As long as you're comfortable using your calculator on that, that's the way to do it.
Okay.
So this says that 3 to the x equals 81. They don't want to know what x is. They want to know what 2 to the x times 2 is. So what's the first thing we need to figure out?
Would it be x? But
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, absolutely. So if 3 to the x is 81, what is x?
That would be
Know that it's going to be a small whole number. It's not going to be like 2.5 or 3 1/4. It's going to be either 2, 3, or 4, or 5 possibly.
well,
What'd you say?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Here's how we can do this.
Is it 3 to the 4th?
Yes. How'd you figure that out? As I was attempting
Well,
to figure out how to.
Well, 3 times 3 is 9.
Okay, 9 squared is 81, so it must be 3 times 3 times 3 times 3.
Right.
Okay, so x is 4, but like I said, they don't want x, they want this. So now what is that quantity equal to?
32.
Good. What's the length of the fence that goes around that garden?
Would it be 60 plus 60 plus 25 plus 25?
Good.
Plus 170?
Uh-huh. If x equals minus 6, how do we know what this is equal to?
Would you just figure it out, I guess?
Okay, so tell me the next line that I want to write. Be very descriptive and specific.
So then you would do negative, parenthesis, negative 6 to square, yeah, squared, minus 2 to parentheses, negative 6 plus 21.
Perfect. I would suggest never skipping a step and trying to jump over and do. In other words, whenever they give you a problem where you just have to fill it in and then simplify, this is critical to write every single thing down, because what's going to be difficult here is making sure our signs are correct. Okay, so what's the next line?
So then it would be plus 36.
This is plus 36.
So then it would be negative 36.
Negative 36. In other words, that's why I said be very specific, and you were. This parentheses was perfect. This square applies only to what is inside the parentheses. It does not apply to this first negative sign. Up here, it's not quantity. In other words, they didn't give us this, negative x squared. They gave us this, which is different.
Right.
This, we just are squaring the x, and then we're going to put a minus sign in front of whatever it is. Okay, what's this?
12.
Plus
Positive
or minus?
12.
Plus 12, okay.
12.
Plus 21.
Plus 21.
So what's that?
Would it be negative 36 plus 33, so
Okay, is there a reason you're not using your calculator?
it's just I pressed the wrong button.
Okay,
Negative 36 plus
because you might have pressed the subtraction button instead of the negative button. You have a TI-84?
No.
Okay, well you might not
I
have.
just had a 2 in front of the 36, the negative 36 by accident, so I had to restart it.
All right, so what is negative 36 plus 33?
Negative 3.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would suggest always using your calculator. Get very familiar with it. Don't waste time trying to do this in your head. It slows things down. But each of these steps right here you want to do. You want to write that one out on your scratch paper, and then the next one you want to write out is that one, and then finally you can put that into your calculator if you want.
Okay.
Okay, so we have V equals 4/3 pi r cubed. What is V when r equals 2?
Would it be V equals 4/3 pi 2 to a third?
Yes. So 4/3 pi 2 to the third. Let's get an answer on that. What's the next thing you're going to do here?
Would it be to simplify 2 to the third?
Well,
2 to
yeah, first you want to take 2 to the, in other words, you want to use PEMDAS. So do the exponential first, and then simplify. So what do you get?
8.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Did you say D?
No. I meant, I'm sorry, I still haven't done it yet.
Oh, okay. Now, you can either choose to enter pi from your calculator if you have a pi key, or if not, use 3.14.
So would you round to 34?
Yeah, to the
Okay.
nearest cubic inch.
Okay.
So just
In my
approximately.
calculator, it was 33.4.
Okay, good. At least you got through this in your calculator. That's good.
Yeah.
There is a relatively easy shortcut here. If I were to assume pi was 3, and I crossed it with that 3, my answer has to be 32 and change, right? And since pi is greater than 3, it's got to be more than 32. But just by a little bit. Well, notice the disparity or the discrepancy in their answers. They don't put 33 and 32 and 35 on there. They put 25, 34, and 96, meaning that a rough approximation is all you need to do here. Very rough. I canceled 3 with a 3.14.
Right.
But
Well,
it was
when I
still
put
good
in my
enough.
calculator, well, when I put the pi sign in my calculator, it gave me a fraction.
Really? What fraction did it give you? 22/7?
It gave me 32 pi divided by, or over 3.
Okay. Right. So if you did that in a calculator, you'd get 34 or 33.99. In other words, you did 32 times pi, all divided by 3, it'll give you a decimal answer. Unless you got it set on everything being fractional, you may have a button on your calculator that lets you put your answers in either decimal or fraction.
Well, when I did that again, when I did what you said to do, it still gave me a fraction, so I think it is. Oh, well, if I just type in 32 pi divided by 3, it gives me 33.5.
Okay.
So never mind.
Okay.
Yep.
I got you. All right. We're good. And even in a situation where if you were to get 33 and a half, and you look on there and there is no 33 and a half, most of the time you want to choose the one closest. Although sometimes that can be a red flag that you did something wrong. What you always want to look for is there a word approximate in the problem? Well, there isn't, but the next best thing says round it to the nearest cubic inch, which is kind of like saying approximate. How are we going to solve this? Number 10.
Well, we know that 4 is times C.
So which answer is it?
Would it just be F? No.
Well, distribute that. In other words, the way to find out is to do each of these. Well, if I do F, I get 4C minus 8D. That's not it.
Right.
But you're on the right technique is you have to back solve each one of these. The only way to do this problem is back solving it. So is it equal to that?
No.
Is it equal to that?
No.
Is it equal to that?
No.
Now, we don't even have to look at the last one. That's got to be the answer.
Yeah.
Notice that the last one is 4C minus 2D after you distribute it.
Right.
Go ahead and read that. I'll let you read it silently. I really shouldn't read them out loud to you. You're not going to have anybody reading them out loud to you during the test. So.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you have to figure out first? Usually these harder problems, this I would say is a medium problem, but they're almost always two-step problems. You're not going to find that many problems on the exam that are one-step problems. Almost all of them require you to do two things. So what's the first thing you have to figure out?
How many lawns equals 20? Oh, wait.
How much do you make per lawn?
Yeah.
Well, they didn't tell us. They just said that you get $20 for showing up, and then you get a certain amount per lawn. Right now, you're making $95 a day mowing 5 lawns. So how much are you getting per lawn?
Well, if you subtract 20 from 95, it's 75. So that's the total amount of 5 lawns.
Okay. So now what?
So then would you just add?
Hold on. If you're mowing lawns, I guarantee you're going to know how to do this. If they're paying you $75 to mow 5 lawns, how much are you getting for each lawn? And how do we calculate it? What do we have to do?
Would you do 75 divided by 5?
Yeah, it's a division problem. What is that?
So then that's 15.
Okay, so now we know that you make $15 per lawn. So today you're going to mow 2 additional lawns. Instead of 5, you're going to do 7. What are you going to make today?
$100, because, oh, wait a second.
There's 2 ways to do this.
It'd be 125 because you would add 15 times 7 and then add 20 to it.
That's actually the hard way to do it, but you're right. This is what we're going to do to come up with our answer. But notice, now we know that you make $15 per lawn. How about just taking and adding $30 to 95? Because we know that you make 95 for doing 5 lawns. Well, 2 more at 15 per lawn is just an additional 30. So it's actually a little faster mentally to just figure adding $30 to 95.
Right.
A subtle thing, but all of those subtle things end up making a difference when added together. Oh, better light, at least. I had my hand steady on this one. The sun came out while I was taking the picture or something. I don't know. So simplify this.
Would it be 5x plus y?
Very good. Which of those equations is not a straight line? One of them is not a straight line, and only one.
So would you,
Look at each of them. Look at all 5 of them. And see if you know right off the top of your head which one it might be. And why.
Well, I know A and D are correct.
Okay.
I think B would be correct too.
B is also a line. A is a vertical line. B is a horizontal line. D is a line with slope 3/4. C isn't in y equal mx plus b format, but you could certainly get it in there real easily by dividing both sides by -1. So that's a straight line. Why is E not a straight line?
Because you can't get y to the other side. It'd be negative y.
It's because there's an x squared. Remember,
Oh.
this is a parabola. This is the standard parabola. So once you lose the linearness of it, it's not a straight line anymore. Now, even though this, so if I added 7 to both sides here, I'd have y equal x squared plus 7, but as all that is a parabola that's been moved up 7 units, right? Vertically shifted. So
Right.
it would be that. But the key thing to notice is that the moment you see an x squared, you know it's not a linear function. It is a quadratic function. And a quadratic function is not a straight line. It's curved. It's a parabola. Now, I'll show you the answers. It's 40 through 80. But let's see if we can figure out how to do this. They're telling us that angle A is 40. They want to know what angle B is.
Okay.
What do we know about that triangle?
Is it an acute triangle?
Yes. That's not helpful, though. In other words, that doesn't tell us any useful thing to help us solve for angle B. There is something very specific that you need to recognize about this particular geometry problem, because you're going to undoubtedly see something like this.
So the line from the angle A to the outside of the perimeter is, well, no.
Let me label this. CB capital A. The only reason I'm labeling it like this is so that we can talk about the sides of the triangle. What is true about lines CB and CA?
They're the radius.
And what is true about radiuses?
They're half of the circle.
Well, within a circle, all radiuses are equal. In other words, if I draw a radius up here, that has to be the same length as this one.
Okay.
If I draw it over here, it's the same length, which means that these two sides are the same. That is an isosceles triangle. Since it's an isosceles triangle, what else is true about it?
Is it all the angles are the same?
Yes, the opposite angles. Not all 3 angles are the same. That couldn't be, because this one's 40. That would make only 120 for the whole triangle. But
It has to equal meeting.
yes, and the opposite angle, the angles opposite the equal sides are also equal. That's what you need to remember about isosceles triangles. Is whatever the two sides that are equal, their opposite angles are also equal. So if I know this angle is the same as this angle, and they all have to total 180, which of these answers is correct? Hold on, my thing all of a sudden won't work. Is it 40, 50, 60, 70, or 80? Back solve it. Pick one of them, put it in there, see if the three of them add up to 180.
It would be 70.
Good. The algebraic way to do it would be angle B plus angle A plus 40 has to equal 180. So B plus A equals 140, but since B and A are the same, that's the same as saying 2A equals 140, A equals 70.
Mm-hmm.
But once you get to the point where you've decided that that's an isosceles triangle, and you know that this angle is the same as this angle, you don't really need to solve it algebraically. You can then let back solving take over. In other words, it was pretty easy to back solve. If this one's 40 and if this were 80, this would have to be 80. Well, that adds to 200. That's too big. Try the next smaller one. Bingo. The moment we try 70, it works.
Okay.
Hold on. Let me blow that up just a hair. Okay. Can you see 15?
Yes.
What they're trying to say here is that if you solved each of these equations,
Mm-hmm.
which one would have answers of x equals 5 and x equals 6?
B.
Good. In other words, usually we're going the other way. Usually they give you this and they say, what is the answer? This, they're just wanting you to go the other direction.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing good on these. You're getting better. Practice really does make perfect.
Yes, that's true.
Well,
Thank you.
or like I always used to say, practice makes less imperfect. Since nobody is perfect, but all practice will make you better no matter what your level of perfection is. Okay, so
Right.
this one here, what am I going to do? They want to know what this expression is equal to when x equals 1/2. This is like the third problem we've had already, where they give you an expression and they want you to substitute a certain number for x and then simplify the expression. So what's the first thing I want to do?
Would you plug it in?
So tell me what to write.
1 over 1/2
Okay?
plus 1 over 1/2 minus 1.
Now, just a word of warning, whenever you're dealing with fractions in either the denominator or the numerator, always make sure your main fractional line is bigger than your other one. In other words, it would be very confusing if I were to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
Because I don't know what's being divided by what here. So always make sure your big fractional line is, you can see what it is. Now, what is that equal to?
Would I just do this in my calculator?
You do it however you can best do it.
3?
Yeah. 3 is the full answer. What is 1 divided by 1/2 in your head?
A half.
No. How do I divide by fractions?
Make the denominator the same.
I multiply by the reciprocal. The reciprocal of 1/2 is 2 over 1. And now when I multiply 1 times 2 over 1, I get 2. So this is 2, this is 2, 2 plus 2 minus 1 is 3. But very important that you understand the concept of dividing by fractions. Calculator, there could be problems, I would think. I don't know. How fast can you get this in your calculator? What would you do if this were a test question? How would you do it?
I would type it into my fraction, so 2/3 divided by 3/4 equals 8/9.
Okay. Okay. So you just typed it in as fractions.
Yes.
Okay. As opposed to flipping the denominator and multiplying. In other words, that's the same as multiplying by 4/3. That's the main thing I want you to understand, is that division is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. All right. The heck? I think I skipped a page. Hold on. No, that's the one we just did. 17, okay. All right, let's look at 17. Now, first of all, this is a relatively hard problem. It's not really, but I'll show you how to do it. But if you didn't know how to do it, and you were running out of time, what would you do?
Kind of guess.
Eyeball it. Eyeball it. What is obviously not correct answers?
11/2.
No, it could conceivably be 11 units to the right and up 2.
Okay.
Obviously can't be minus 6/2, because minus would have to be on the other side of the y-axis. Can't be minus 1 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
Could be 9/3. Could it be 10 comma minus 3?
No.
So the only two answers it can be is either C or E.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty good shot, 50-50. Let's figure out how to do it, though. What do I know about this midpoint here? Well, first of all, that's one thing I know, is that it is a midpoint.
Mm-hmm.
M is at minus 1 comma minus 4. What have we learned about midpoints? How do I figure out the point right there?
By finding the difference.
How do you do it? What is the x coordinate going to be?
will it be
How far is it, x-coordinate only, how far is it from -1 to 5?
4?
Think of a number line. There's -1, there's 0, here's 5. How far is it between -1 and 5?
Oh,
What's the distance from here to here?
2?
Does it look 2? It's 5 from here to here.
So then 3?
Okay, let me put a grid on this thing. There's my number line. How far is it from -1? How many steps do you have to take to get from -1 to 5?
5.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It can't be 5 because it's 5 between 0 and 5. Whenever you have single-digit numbers that you are adding or subtracting, the best way to really understand it, rather than memorizing rules about negative numbers and positive numbers, is to picture it on a number line. What is that distance? Well, it's certainly not 4. It's not 5. It's got to be 6. There are 6 intervals between those two numbers. So, what does the x-coordinate up here have to be?
11.
Okay. And then let's figure out the y-coordinate also. How far is it between -4 on a number line and -1?
Would it be 4 or 3?
3. In other words, if you do -4 minus 1, you get -3. If you do -1 minus a -4, you get +3. So depending on which number you subtract from the other, well, you'll either get a positive or a negative, but in this case, we know we're going up, right? So what is the y-coordinate going to be? We went 3 steps to get to -1. Yeah, we got to go 3 more steps because that is at the midpoint. So it's 2. But once we had the 11, we had our answer because it was the only one that had 11 as an answer. 11, remember we had it narrowed down to 9,3 or 11,2. So when you're doing this problem, you get the x value, you're done.
Okay.
Okay? When I say how far is it between two numbers, the answer always is to subtract those two numbers. I put it on a number line so you could see it graphically. But if I say how far is it between -2 and +6, well, I'm going to start with -2 and I'm going to subtract the 6. That gives me -8. That means it is 8 units away. The minus sign merely tells me that I am going in the other direction. That's really the number of units it is between +6 and -2. It's 8 units to the left. But just remember that when you if you get confused about problems like this, put both numbers on a number line. Now, both numbers here are a -2 and a +6. Don't confuse this, which is the subtraction sign, with this, which is the negative sign.
Mm-hmm.
They mean different things. $18. $18's got 8 full lines in it. And yet, it's a very simple problem. Just because it has 8 lines and lots of numbers in there doesn't mean much. Some of these numbers have nothing to do with anything. This 30 days is immaterial. So is this. The bottom line is that he's getting 9 cents per mile for the first 25 miles and 7 cents per mile for every mile over that. So based on 63 miles, what does he earn?
Well, 25 times 0.9.
Good.
Would be
Times 25 times 0.09. Because it's 9 cents per mile.
$2.24.
Okay. Plus what?
And then you would do 38 times 0.07.
That's the total he makes right there. What is that?
$4.91.
Together?
Yes.
Yeah, that would be about right. If this was $2.25, it's going to make about that much more. All right. Absolute value. That's what that sign means. Whoops. Hold on. So first of all, let me ask you this. What's that equal to?
13.
Okay. So you know absolute value. Okay. So which of those expressions has to be true?
X is equal to Y.
Well, if x was equal to y, would the absolute value of x be greater than y?
No. Oh, yes.
It
No.
can't be. In other words, if x is equal to y, and I put in 13 for x, is the absolute value of 13 greater than the absolute value of 13?
No.
So x and y no way can be equal.
So then it'd be X is less than Y.
No. If there's no way x and y can be equal, then this
Then it
has
would
to be the answer.
Okay.
If this is always false, and it is, then this is true. X cannot be equal to y. We just proved that if they were equal, this could not be true. So they must not be equal. And they wouldn't have to, in other words, for the absolute value of x to be greater than the absolute value of y, I just need the number to be bigger, right? Minus 13 is greater than positive 10 because 13 is greater than 10. And yet here, x is less than y. And if I change the sign on it, x would be greater than y. So all of these are sometimes true, but they don't have to be true. The only statement that has to be true is D.
Mm-hmm.
For which non-negative value of x, okay, well, they're all non-negative, so they didn't even need to say that word, is that expression undefined? What would make that expression undefined? 1 over 100 minus 4x squared. What do they mean by undefined? What would make that undefined?
0?
Division by 0. This thing's never going to be equal to 0 because the numerator is 1. The only way an expression can be equal to 0 is if its numerator is 0. So this cannot be 0, but there's a certain value of x that makes it undefined, and that's the value that makes my denominator 0. So how do I figure that out? In other words, this is a two-step problem. One is knowing that I need this to be equal to 0 for it to be undefined. So solve that. It's the first step, solving that.
You would subtract 100 to the other side?
Okay, I would actually subtract the 4x just to keep all the signs positive. If I move the 100 to the other side, I've got this, which is fine. Now I can divide by 1 to make the signs positive. But when I'm solving algebra problems, I like to keep everything positive if I can. There is no magic about having x on the left side of an equation. It works just fine to write it as 100 equals 4x squared, which is what I would do. Now what?
Well, you would divide by 4.
Okay.
So then that would be 25. Then you'd square root both of them. Equals 5.
That's the value of x that does not work. The only one. Notice it's not 0. If x is 0, then it's 1 over 100. Only 5 makes this denominator equal to 0. All right. Well, we wrap it up with that question, and we'll pick up from there next time. That's pretty good. We got through 20 questions.
Great.
All right. I will, let's see. Should I assume an appointment next week unless I hear from you otherwise?
Yes.
Okay. And then, like I said, I got you down for the next week and the week after. And if you want to change that, and in fact the week after that. So
Okay.
just let me know if you want to.
Okay.
I'm sorry?
Well, the only change that would happen would maybe be moving it to Tuesday from 3 to 4 for every week.
Okay. My Tuesday, I have a permanent 3 o'clock on Tuesdays from 3 to 3:30. So
what
I
about
can move it to 3:30 on Tuesday. Or I can move it to 3 on Wednesday.
What about Thursday at 3?
Yes, that works also. At the moment, you have to understand that when I say that's open right now, I can't guarantee 5 minutes from now that somebody won't go in and take it. Unless you tell me to lock it up. You know, if you tell me you want that spot, I can certainly do that. But,
okay. Well, let me talk to my mom about it, and I will text you. Or do you want me to call you?
Either one. Texting is fine.
Okay. I'll let you know before Monday of next week.
Okay, Nikki. Sounds good.
All right.
Have a good week. I'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.